Okay, I have with me beloved CS rep Nick Doren. Nick works with all the marketing operators, and I can't think of anyone better to speak on this topic. This week, the marketing operators, the episode was about this idea of incrementality and profitability and the way that brands sometimes think of channels and tactics being either incremental or not incremental. And I think what Cody was arguing and Connor is that this is all incrementality is all relative to spend. You should consider like not just incrementality, but the efficiency of that spend. A cost per incremental acquisition or an incremental ROAS enables you to get at that. And they kind of called on Haus to define this term around profitable and incremental. I think we can do that. Maybe PAI has like a nice ring to it, pie. But before we go there, I want to actually talk about whether that's a good idea, like to decision on results and potentially cut channels that are not both profitable and incremental. So Nick, talk to me about this idea. I mean, just to tee it up a bit, there is a paid CAC that we're working with in terms of these channels. And then there's this like blended CAC. And I think these are two things. And I want you to kind of educate on the way those are different and how to think about them.
Yeah. So I think most brands, when they come to us, are operating under this idea of like, we have some North Star metric in the sky that our NER at a business level must be a 3x or whatever that might be. And generally, they translate those goals directly over to the individual channel level that we're measuring inside of Haus. So they say, my overall goal is a 3x. That means my Meta, my TikTok, my Google all needs to perform at a 3x. I think what that's missing is this underlying sense of organic contribution to the business and the idea that you actually have a little bit of leeway on a paid acquisition standpoint to ladder into your overall goal as a business. Meaning, if we have a business and we run an all up digital holdout test that shows 50% lift, meaning all of our paid channels are contributing to 50% of the overall business, that insinuates that 50% of the business is driven organically by non-paid sources. So that same business that's shooting for a 3 NER at a business level, or even like a new customer NER we can contextualize for the purpose of acquisition. In theory, if 50% of the business is being driven organically, their paid channels can be held to a standard lower than whatever that 3x is. And in this case, it's even numbers, so like 50-50. In theory, you could shoot for a 1.5 incremental return on ad spend on all of your channels and still sort of net out in the same place that you want at, the overall business level. And what that allows you to do, like a lot of the times when our customers come in and they have this number in the sky that they need to hit from like some unit economic or break even, profitability metric, they see that a lot of their channels are not performing at that figure. And they say, well, we can't scale spend on any of these channels because, we're not on an individual customer by customer basis breaking even. What that prevents you from doing is actually growing the business, when in reality, you can use these results, even if there's sub that, number in the sky, 3 MER or customer MER, to drive the results you want for your business in a way that's like value accretive to the overall business. So it's a little bit complex, but, apples to apples, there are ways to do this. And I don't know, Olivia, if it makes sense to like actually look at this on a spreadsheet. Like we've shown this to some customers. Do you want me to jump into that?
Yeah, pop up the spreadsheet. And while you're pulling it up, there are also two considerations to keep in mind. If you're really going to hold these channels to being profitable on a 3-week experiment, like that's a 3-week experiment. There are impact and latent impact of advertising that you can't capture in a 3-week test. So you might be like really limiting your growth by holding it to like one of these profitability goals in a 3-week experiment. And then the other piece, and Nick, I think this is what you're going to illustrate here with the sheet, is that if you're moving money from, as long as you're within your blended goal, if you're moving money from less incremental pockets into more incremental pockets over time, you are going to improve your business no matter what that actual incremental ROAS number is. So walk us through that idea.
Yeah. So, I mean, like this number in the middle of the sheet here says this customer's goal break even high ROAS, that again stems from the overall business number, is a 3x. We've gone through a series of tests with this customer. Let's say no channel is hitting that 3x number. They might say, Houses, these incrementality studies are not providing any value because all they're telling me is bad news about the channels and that none of them are hitting my goal. You could look at it that way, but you could also look at it going back to this more like holistic business level improvement idea of two specific examples here. So let's say we test TikTok, 20K per week, we get a 1x incremental return on ad spend. So for every dollar we spend incrementally, we're getting $1 in return. We also concurrently at the same time test Meta, same structure, a little bit more spend. We get a 2x ROAS. So basically like double the effect that we're getting incrementally from the other channel. Again, in like V1 of how to look at this, if someone comes to the door, they might say, neither of these are a success. And certainly like, there's a way that you could look at it and come to that conclusion. But another way to look at it is like, hey, I need to continue to grow my business and my budgets are at these levels right now. How can I redistribute these funds that are going to, maybe they don't like change the channel by channel IROAS, but how do I influence my business level new customer MER or MER as a whole by taking the results of this study? And it's really clear actually how you can do that, right? So we have a 1x on TikTok, a 2x on Meta. Let's say we make the action and reallocate 50% of these funds, so 10K per week, into Meta. And we basically tack that on to the top tier of spend on Meta. And we retest that in a scale up approach. And the result comes back and says that additional 10K per week on Meta is still returning a 2x incremental return on ad spend. And once again, it's not at this 3x number, but there's a very clear sort of like backing into math that you can do here that essentially shows you the value creation of making that shift in budget allocation. And very simply, it's like beforehand, we were using this 10K in a channel that was driving a 1x incremental return on ad spend. That's 20,000 in value incrementally from that spend. Now we are using it, or in reverse, sorry. Now we're getting 20,000 in value versus previously we were getting 10,000 in value. We've generated $10,000 of additional revenue for the business using the same level of investment on these channels. That's 10K per week. That's 40K per month. That's 120K over 90 days. You can see that maybe this doesn't like bubble up all the way to your financial metrics that you're looking at for the business. But if we make 3 of these reallocations per month and we can drive 360,000 in incremental 90-day revenue or something like that, you start to see that we're using the same budget from a paid perspective, but driving more top line for the business. And that's going to be improving this top line new customer MER number that most of our customers, I think, if you really press them on it, is sort of what they're striving for in the test. So I think that gives a little bit of context here. This is like possibly an oversimplified example, but generally, like we have a lot of customers at Haus looking at it this way and not sort of like gearing specifically to whatever their break-even ROAS or CPA number is on a unit economic basis.
Yep. This is not to pick on Cody, but this is kind of the point around if your CPIA comes up and it's not profitable based on your goals, but you are still spending profitably on a blended basis, can you spend slightly less efficient than you would like in pursuit of growth, knowing that you're where you need to be from a top line? And again, moving money from these less incremental pockets, like you mentioned here at TikTok, into the more incremental pockets, you will see that show up in terms of improved MER. So this is our response video, our rebuttal to, do you actually need to be profitable and incremental in your experiments? I think that is a very high bar and it might potentially be limiting growth. Thanks for listening, and we'll definitely do a part 2.